Just for those of you who are now tuning in, we are with Dr. Fatima Karzai, and we are going over a few of the questions related to the current COVID-19 virus. Um, Dr. Karzai is walking us through the origins, the mechanism through which it enters the body, reaches the respiratory system, and basically the whole life cycle of the virus. Back to you, Dr. Karzai.
Thank you. So just as I was saying, so it's a respiratory virus, so droplets are very important. So coughing, sneezing, and then touching your face and then touching a surface. It's a very infectious virus, more than the flu. So that's why you're seeing it actually passed on to more people than you would see in a normal flu season. So once it gets into that respiratory tract and into the body, viruses use their machinery to actually take over your own cells and make more virus. And so once they start doing that, this particular virus seems in adults to want to go towards the respiratory tract. We are seeing, though, some different manifestations of the disease in different people, and especially in children now, we're seeing a different kind of course. But that's why it's so important to wear a mask. It's not so much even protecting yourself, but if you're an asymptomatic carrier and you were to sneeze or cough, you could actually infect a lot of people.
Okay, and the next question we have is how does COVID 19, is that a typo? Okay, sorry. How does COVID 19 affect the human immune system? I think you mentioned a little bit of that, but if you want to expand on that.
Sure. So when a virus gets into a cell and then this takes over the cell and starts making more of itself, what happens is your own immune system tries to come in and fight the virus. So it recognizes it as a foreign entity. So your immune system, which consists of these cells that come from your bone marrow, come in and try to do two things. First, identify what's foreign, and second, attack it. So once the virus is in its place, the immune system tries to come in. Sometimes it can go into an overdrive, which you can see an inflammatory response from the immune system, which is some of the symptoms you can see in patients who are having difficulty with a lot of symptoms.
So in terms of treatments and basically the cure for anyone who gets infected with the virus, has any progress been made? I know there's a lot of talk about hydroxychloroquine, and some other medications. Any anything that's emerging right now?
So initially, there was a lot of excitement about hydroxychloroquine, and the Z-Pak. Most of our viewers probably have heard of Z-Paks or taken them before. So azithromycin, which is an antibiotic. This came out of some studies in France, a very small study where people thought that maybe this would be some kind of a treatment. Hydroxychloroquine is usually used for malaria, or it's used for people who have rheumatologic diseases. What we found, though, recently from other studies, that it really doesn't show that much of an effectiveness that was initially thought. And so right now it's not being used like it was maybe a month or two ago. Another drug that's being used more in clinical trials is something called remdesivir. It's an antivirus. It was produced for a general virus, and people are trying to determine if it can be used for this one in particular. It was used for Ebola also. So some of the studies are showing that it actually improves symptoms, but it's too early to tell if it actually makes more of impact on the disease. So that kind of information will be up and coming soon, I hope.
I've seen folks comment on social media about the relative lower rates of infection in South Asia and places like that, and some folks they base it on some of these similar medication that people take to prevent malaria and the like. Is there any truth to that based on the research that you may be aware of?
Not so far. I mean, there's a lot of things that are being used in general hoping to find some kind of a benefit, but that could be due to other factors rather than just using these kind of drugs for prophylaxis.
I guess the next natural question is vaccines. There
Right,
has been some good news. I think Moderna announced
right.
that their vaccine has shown promising results in the initial stages. Uh, how many are there that show promise, and what is the optimistic or as opposed to realistic timeline that we can actually latch on to as a hope that hopefully this will be over soon?
So that's a great. What we know, one of the ways that we're going to be able to go on and live a fuller life again, maybe not a life we had pre-COVID, but something similar to what we had, is to get what's called herd immunity, to get everybody immune to the disease somehow or another. And the way to do that is vaccines. And so, yeah, like you mentioned, Moderna has showed promising results. They're actually moving pretty quickly to try to get a vaccine out by the end of this year, early next year. There actually has been a lot of movement on this. So this is one of the fastest vaccine developments I've ever seen, or clinical trials even. So what they're trying to do is get this manufactured in high amounts to get to everybody as soon as possible. We'll have to wait and see what their data matures to, but it really is promising. On the short end, we're looking at 12 months, hopefully. On the longer end, an effective vaccine may take up to 18 months. But one of the good things is a lot of different places are actually collaborating on making vaccines and treatments. So hopefully the timeline will be shorter rather than longer.
Thank you, Dr. Karzai. Speaking of accessibility to the vaccine, um, there, there, there are a lot of marginalized communities. There are people without insurance. What are, what do you speculate will take place to ensure that marginalized communities and the disenfranchised and everyone will have access sooner, because there has been a lot in the news of what we heard in regards to getting tested. It seemed like a lot of communities were left behind when the first batch of testing came out and they had to wait. What are your thoughts on this?
So absolutely, that's true. Disenfranchised communities, people with lower socioeconomic abilities, people who maybe need to work so they can't telework because they're actually working to pay rent and food. Those are the communities that got hit the hardest. And a lot of those people in those communities actually have underlying health issues anyway, which makes them more susceptible. I mean, what really needs to be done on a broad scale is to make this a cheap vaccine to get, and to be able to set up like testing stations where everybody can go and actually get the vaccine for either free or a very low price. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll have to see. Hopefully, government organizations and private insurances will cover the vaccine completely also.
So I believe there is a new commission that was set up, or some sort of entity to focus on speeding up the process of developing the vaccine. Now, does this encompass all the different vaccines? I hear about 100 of them that are being worked on. Is the government working through this new setup with all of these entities and the private sector, or is it? I mean, I just want, I guess, our viewers to know how centralized the system is, or whether it's just laissez-faire and whoever comes up with it will come up with it.
So it's a little bit of both. So it is a little laissez-faire because there are so many different companies and so many trying to get to that vaccine point as soon as possible. But there are companies that are working with the federal government in particular and with other agencies to get their vaccine out as soon as possible. So it's a combination of both. There are people that are working together, and then there are other companies that are working more by themselves. So it is somewhat a race to the finish right now, but I'm sure that it's a collaborative effort if somebody actually does get the vaccine and feels it like it will be effective.
And you yourself being a researcher at the NIH,
Mhm.
what's the role of NIH in
Sure. So
developing this vaccine?
I am a medical oncologist, so I work in the National Cancer Institute, but the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, which Tony Fauci works at, they are working with the government to actually, one, get clinical trials open for treatment, and then working with other companies to get vaccine production. So they actually are looking at the DNA of the virus itself and trying to find vaccines for it.
Okay, thank you. The next question we have is so from what came out in the news, we saw that the U.S. was not ready and did not do early testing in the same way that South Korea did, or the way New Zealand mitigated this crisis very successfully. Would you say this was an issue of political will, or was this bound to happen because the US is not New Zealand or South Korea, both geographically and demographically? Or being a super busy destination from travelers around the world? What are your thoughts on this?
So definitely the virus was circulating before anybody knew it was circulating. So it seems as though a lot of people who had it came from Europe rather just from China. Maybe they started off in China, went to Europe, it spread, it came here. But I think at a level, nobody was ready for it. Um, Definitely, you can see the economy is opening back up in states, and not everybody's been tested. It's very important to get everybody tested to know who has it, who needs to quarantine. So I think it was a systems level issue more than anything else, and it continues to be. I don't think we're nearly where we need to be on testing the general population.
Okay, and just to transition into the question of um, how soon can anyone get a test? And is it affordable? Are there any efforts that are being made to make the test accessible to those?
So there's areas where people have set up testing sites. It's more dependent on the local governments than it is by the federal government. It really does depend where you live and how accessible healthcare is. Right now, not everybody that needs a test is getting one. For those who do get tested, they're usually showing symptoms, fever, cough, those kind of things that we've heard so much about. So there really needs to be a ramp up. And in terms of cost, I think that most insurances and federal government plans do cover it. But for those who don't have insurance, it is a burden.
Certainly, and I think I just recently read that um, either is it Loudoun County or Fauquier County? Loudoun County is now having testing available for free. So that's good, promising news. Moving on, we hear about flattening the curve a lot, and we're all doing our best to flatten the curve. How flat is this curve right now, and what's the current trajectory?
So the DC metro area, so DC, Maryland, Virginia, has actually done a really good job flattening that curve. So basically, what we want when you flatten a curve is that you don't want to overwhelm the healthcare system. So instead of everybody getting sick at the same time and running to the hospital, you're actually trying to spread that out over time. When you do that, you extend that time period. So it seems as though this area really hasn't hit the peak yet, but the peak won't be as bad as was originally thought. And so staying home and mitigation actually did work. So we're doing a good job, but we need to continue doing so because around this area, there's still a lot of cases and daily they're not decreasing. So there's still some room left to keep working at it.
So there's a lot of conspiracy theories
Mhm.
out there about this pandemic, and there are some that are sort of they fall in the gray area because different governments blame each other. How how does a layperson sort of separate the truth from falsehood from your background and experience? What would you tell our community? What kind of advice would you give us to address this issue?
Right. And so I think that having skepticism is fine, especially if you're thinking about the origins of disease. We've heard a lot of the conspiracy theories about where this actually started. Was this really a human that transferred it to other humans, or was it created in a lab? The thing that we just have to be a little careful of is there's a lot of things going around, that you don't want to partake in because it might hurt you in other ways. So, trying to blow dry your nose, that's not going to kill the virus. And things like that that people hear. Just know that, for every disease, God has made a cure, but sometimes that cure involves medicine and not so much just herbal remedies or home remedies. So it's good to have skepticism, but if you're sick, seek medical help.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I know many people are so overwhelmed at what is true and what isn't. So thank you for that guidance. For those of you who have recently joined in, we are talking to Dr. Fatima Karzai from NIH, and she's answering some of our COVID-19 related questions. The next question we have for Dr. Karzai is, we hear a lot of talk on a possible second wave, a third wave. Um, do you think that there will be another wave perhaps this fall?
So definitely the coronavirus is with us. We're not eradicating it, we're trying to contain it. It's out of the window of trying to eradicate it right now. So we have to learn how to live with it. And so once people start to go out again, or it becomes colder weather and everybody is more indoors, there most likely will be a second wave. This second wave might be a little worse just because the flu will hit at the same time. So it's going to be very important that everybody gets their flu shot this year, because what you don't want is to try to be battling COVID-19 and the flu at the same time, because that's very dangerous. And so until there is a vaccine and more people have immunity, there is going to be these waves that come and go.
The flu vaccine, for how long is it effective? Do people have to do this annually?
They do, because what they actually do to make the flu vaccine is they look at what's happening on the other side of the world. So in Australia, and they take a look at what flu strain it is, and they make a new vaccine every year, because that strain actually changes over time. So the best thing to do would be get your flu vaccine every year.
Now, this question maybe is a little too late for it, but it's still probably good to know for the community, as we're in the last stretch of the blessed month of Ramadan.
Yeah.
Uh, are there any adverse um, health implications for people who are at risk or maybe exposed or who are actually infected with COVID-19 in terms of fasting? Is it okay to fast if you're at risk or if you're actually infected? Um, what are your thoughts on that?
So if you're actually infected, fasting can actually harm you more than benefit, because you need to make sure that you're eating, you're drinking, you're trying to keep your fluid levels up, you're trying to keep hydrated. So if you're infected with symptoms, I think that it would be best to try to take care of yourself and then make up your missed fast when you're feeling better. For those people who aren't infected right now, it's actually interesting because there's some data that's come out several years ago that fasting actually resets your immune system. So it actually makes your immune system more hardy and stronger over time. So I think if you're not symptomatic and you're at home, fasting is fine.
That is very profound, and I think that just reassuring that there are, in addition to the spiritual benefits, there are actual health benefits, and more of them are sort of being revealed to us. So thank you for
Right,
sharing
because
that.
as it mentions in the Quran, fast if you only you knew what the benefits were. Well, now we're trying to, slowly finding out what the other benefits are, health wise.
Thank you. Yeah, that was absolutely beautiful. A great connection. I think many of us are wondering what's to come after this excessive, um, use of antibacterial products, wipes.
Yeah.
They're flying off the shelves. It's hard to locate them. Um,
Social distancing.
yeah, social distancing. Like, mashallah, our children have not, become sick since they've been home for the past, what, 2 months, over 2 months now. Um, so, what does this mean to our immune system when we come out of this? Are we all going to end up catching everything and anything because we've, stayed away from the possibilities? What do you think about that?
So that's a good question. Once we go back to whatever our new lives will look like, even if we social distance, just being near other people gives you more of a risk of getting the common cold or other infections. So we might, like children, when they go out to daycare or school, come home with a lot of infections. So it's going to be interesting to see, especially because when we're wiping down everything, we're actually giving some other bacteria hope because they're becoming super resistant to these things. But hopefully, as long as we're able to keep our distance, keep washing our hands, our immune systems will be able to take care of those infections as well.
Speaking of those issues, we have a few questions that are coming in right now. One of our community members is asking, I'm running a home daycare and will open June 1st. Only 2 to 4 kids at a time, I guess. Is that okay?
So it would, we are slowly opening up. The economy has to restart, but it has to be taken with a grain of salt because we are still going to be having these infections. So 2 to 4 kids, if they're adequately spaced apart, I know it's difficult, but trying to keep the areas clean, trying to keep the children themselves to wash their hands, it should be okay. But the community member still needs to be vigilant because maybe the children are not showing any symptoms, but it could be that they have some form of the virus.
Thank you. Another question comes in from Sue Ann. She asks, are ventilators causing deaths and are more harmful than they are helpful?
So, as doctors, we don't want to put patients on ventilators. If you're on a ventilator, it's because you can no longer breathe on your own and you need assistance. And so, those patients that are actually on the ventilators, if those ventilators were to stop or we would stop them, they would actually have a worse off condition than being on the ventilator. So, no, they don't cause harm. They're actually trying to help the patient in a situation that they need the utmost help.
I don't believe we have any other questions that came in um, aside from what we went over. Dr. Karzai, we want to give you the floor to, share any other insight you would like or to conclude.
Sure. No, again, I want to thank you both for having me today. It was very much my honor to be here. I hope I shed some light on some issues that have been discussed in our community. And if anybody has any other questions or concerns, I'd be happy to talk to anybody in the future as well. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karzai, especially knowing that in this difficult time how busy medical professionals are. So we really appreciate your time and we're grateful to you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family. And thank you all community members for joining us. I hope you found the information that was shared by Dr. Karzai relevant and informative. And inshallah, we will be in touch. And if you have any further questions, as Dr. Karzai said, just send them our way. We will hopefully do one of these again soon, and we'll all get through this together as a community. So appreciate all of you being here. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.